Hi everyone. Thank you so much for tuning back in the psychology department of SFRC. So today we are going to deal with something that is related to your own personality. Yes, we are going to see about a theory of personality. Before I introduce you to the title of the theory directly, let's look into the picture as usual. Okay, I want you to metaphorically imagine that you are that broken car that needs to be repaired. Yeah, but I want you to realize, I want you to metaphorically imagine that you are the broken personality and two theorists, two mechanics are trying to fix your broken car. One belonging to the Freudian perspective and one belonging to the behavioral perspective. You might already have been familiar with the Freudian perspective and they would look at a broken car with this particular claim in their mind. What would have been a trauma that is meant that was happening to the car that made the car broken. So let's look into the past trauma and figure out what parts of your car needs to be repaired. So they look at personality with a retrospective means of looking at it. And now behavioral therapists look at it in an opposite way. They look at, they don't look into your past. They don't actually go retrospective in nature. They don't care about what trauma or what accidents this car faced. They only look at the futuristic occurrences in respect to the functional relationships of the environment. They say that okay, let's just drive the car a bit. Let's just drive it around and see what might be the problem with this car. So, two contrasting differential perspectives of personality in psychology. They both are opposites to each other like oil and water. But imagine these two contrasting perspectives of personality coming into a single personality theory. Interesting, right? Interesting and intriguing to me if you ask. So, psychodynamic perspective coming in accordance with the learning perspective. A retrospective perspective is coming in accordance with a non-retrospective futuristic approach. Funny, right? But this personality theory aims at combining these both contrasting personalities, and that is Dollard and Miller's theory of personality, and I am Pooja Shri, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychology, going to explain to you about this personality theory. Yes. Now, this is the agenda of today's seminar. So, here you can see the fundamentals of learning process will be taught to you at first, and then the learning process will be debriefed to you later. Yes, let's look into the fundamentals of learning process, like how do personality gets learned, what are the dynamics or elements of personality that accounts to the Dollard and Miller's personality. Yes, so in order for you to learn something, in order for you to start building your personality, you must want something with whole of your heart. Let's say that you want to actually achieve success in academics, right? You must want it from the bottom of your own heart, okay? You must not want it because of societal pressure, you must want it with all your passion and intensity. So, the want is that much intensified. And then you must notice something, that is cues. So, in order for you to achieve academic success, you cannot be just dreaming about academic success, right? You must take the book, open it and then actually start learning it. So, you must notice your academic subjects in order for you to start learning for your academic success. And then you must do something, yeah. You cannot be just taking your books, keeping it idle and do nothing, right. You must actually learn in order for you to actually go chase your goal of achieving academic success. And the fourth one is you must get something. So, imagine that you are working, you have a strong want in your mind. Yes, I want to achieve this academic success. So, you take your books, lay it down and you notice it perfectly and then you study day and night. But imagine you getting no reinforcement or no reward. So, you still end up getting low marks than you actually aimed to get. What will you do? Some people might actually stop wanting to achieve academic success. So, you must get something in order for you to thrive in the chase of the particular want. So, these are the four cues that Dollard and Miller aims at in explaining your whole personality. So, wanting something is the actual drive we are talking about. So, if your personality want to thrive, you must have the drive in you. You must have the drive or passion to try out new things in life, to go for it and interact with your environment. And you must notice something. Noticing something is the actual cues in your environment. So, when you want something, we always go for cues to understand how we are going to satisfy the drive. and then you must do something which is your responses. So, in environment, for you to live, you have varieties of responses to actually portray your inner drive, and then you must get something which is the reward or punishment. So, when a behavior is exhibited in an environment, what happens? The functional relationship will result in a consequence that can be desirable or undesirable to you. A desirable consequence is called a reward and an undesirable consequence is called a punishment. So, these are the 4 major criterions of elements that are responsible for explaining personality according to Dollard and Miller. So, we will look into each of these in detail. So, the first component is called drive. So, drive is a strong stimulus which impels action. The first factor in this definition is the strong stimulus. It is mostly internal, but it must be strong. Okay? For example, a stimulus of hunger, a stimulus of thirst. These things are actually so strong that without satisfying these, you may not live. So, the more intense a stimulus is that is allowing you to intensifiedly work at reducing the drive, that particular explanations can result in you calling that stimulus a drive. And it must impel action. It must supply you with energy for you to do something in order to reduce the drive. So, these are the basic qualities required for you to classify a particular stimulus into something called drive. Not all stimulus can be drive, but mostly drives are internal in nature. So, there are 2 types of drives, primary drive and secondary drive. So, it is an easy concept, so I do not want to explain to detail, but when a primary drive is hunger, your secondary drive can be for money. So, when you use money, you can actually satisfy your hunger. For more complex example for this primary and secondary drive distinction, let us look at the primary drive being pain. So, we all live to avoid pain. We do not want pain in our life. So, we do all sort of things to avoid pain. So, you study for a particular period of time even when you do not like to study because your mom might slap you. Yeah? So, you are doing it in order to avoid pain. So, these type of intensified stimulus can be a resultant of your primary drives. Whereas, let us look into anxiety as an example. So, you do not want pain in your life, right. So, what you do? You become anxious of the environment and you anticipate any stimulus that can cause you pain. So, you become vigilant, you become ready to face any stimulus that does not even have an assurance of happening in your life, but still we become ready for a futuristic occurrence. So, this is something more complex. It is not actually a primary drive, but it is an advanced concept of primary drive that is acquired from the environment. So, chronic expectations of pain in your environment can or might lead to something called anxiety. You might be anxious around the environment in order for you to avoid the primary drive of experiencing pain. So, this is the 2 different types of drives that we can come across. So, these 2 type of drives actually drive us towards your personality development. So, the second most important element of personality are the cues. So, you notice something in your environment and you channelize the energy from your drive in order for you to reduce the particular drive. Okay? So, it is a stimulus that determines a specific manifestation of a response. The main difference between the drives and the cues is that drive will result in activation of energy. So, if you are hungry, your hunger pangs depict drive. So, your drive is activated, so you are ready to fulfill that particular drive. Whereas cues, they direct the channelization of that energy to actually satisfy your drive. For example, let us just say that you are hungry. So, hunger is the primary drive we are talking about. So, if you get milk in your hand, you might drink it. So, if you get a bread in your hand, you might chew it. So, you can see how the responses to different cues in your environment. In this example, you can see how milk and bread are cues in the environment that is available. So, in order to satisfy your inner drive, what you do? You choose your cues. So, with respect to the nature of the cue, you select your responses accordingly. So, when you get a glass of milk, what you do? You drink it. When you get a loaf of bread, what you do? You eat it. So, you can see how responses differ accordingly. So, cues are the specific stimulus that directs you and that is super specific and it determines the type of response that you are going to make in accordance with the cue. The third one is hierarchy of responses, the behavior that we are actually doing in the environment. So, we as humans, we have a list of response hierarchy, because we have been living the life. In my case, I have been living the life for 24 years. So, I have a huge response hierarchy because I have experiences worth of it. So, all the responses that you do in your life, all the behavior that you do in your life, it is arranged, as you can see, in a pyramidal fashion, in a hierarchical fashion. So, that is called a response hierarchy. So, all the behaviors that you do, I want you to imagine from day to night, you do endless amounts of behavior. So, what your behavior hierarchy or response hierarchy does is, it classifies all the behavioral channel into the one that are highly probable responses to the least probable responses. So, the high probable responses are more likely to be on the top of the pyramid, whereas the least probable might be on the bottom of the pyramid. So, the high probable responses are also called as dominant responses. So, what is high probable and what is least probable responses, if you might ask? High probable responses have more chances of getting the drive done when compared to least probable responses. For example, when you take hunger example that we saw in the last slide, you can see how a glass of milk can satisfy your hunger pangs, but a loaf of bread with an omelette can do it much better. So, you can see how a loaf of bread with omelette becomes the high probable chance of you selecting the queue rather than just a glass of milk. So, the probability of you getting your drive, fully satisfied results in you classifying your behavior into high probable response categories to least probable response categories. So, you have a set of dominant responses, and these dominant responses will determine what kind of a person you are and your personality. Yes. And let us say, I will also include another example. Let us just go into the response hierarchy of a baby, right. A baby that has very limited experience, so it has very limited responses also. The response hierarchy is also very easy for us to mark. So, let us just say that the baby has an uncomfortable diaper. So, the diaper has to be changed. So, this is a primary drive that drives the baby to do something in order to get rid of an uncomfortable diaper. So, let us see the response hierarchy being crying or pushing it away or hand movement. So, the baby can actually cry to get the attention of the mother. Okay. So, that is response number 1. So, response number 2 is the baby can try to push the diaper away to get the attention of the mom, and response number 3 might be doing some random hand movements to get the attention of the mother. So, what do you think will be the best in attaining the attention of the mom? Obviously, through crying. When a baby cries in our family, we always pay attention to the baby no matter what work that you are doing. So, the baby's hierarchy, inside the baby's hierarchy, R1 might be the high probable response and R3 might be the low probable response. So, this is how your response behavior has dominant responses and least probable responses ordered in a hierarchical fashion for you to display personality in environmental circumstances. The fourth principle in your elements of personality is your reinforcement, and you must get something. You must want something, you must notice something, you must do something. You all do this because of this particular last stage of personality, to get a reinforcement, to get an idea, to get a consequence of why you are doing things. So, a reinforcement is any response that reduces the drive. So, you are taking all these jargons so that you can reduce the drive in the first place. So, when you are hungry and you eat a loaf of bread and an omelette, so that particular behavior is taking place because you want to reduce that drive of hunger, you want to feel satiated, you want to feel satisfied. So, that is why you go through all the 3 fundamentals of behavior so that you can actually attain to this behavior called reinforcement, this response called reinforcement. So, there are 2 possible responses or consequences that you might have when you do a particular behavior. So, even one, the drive gets actually reduced and you feel okay, which is the reinforcement, or the drive does not get reduced. So, let us say that you are thirsty. Okay. So, you have a glass of milk and you have a, what will you choose? You actually will choose the glass of water because you are actually thirsty. So, water becomes a positive reinforcer in this case, whereas your cookie does not reinforce the behavior because it does not satisfy the drive of thirst. But when you are hungry instead, water does not do much use. You might eat cookies rather than water. So which you prefer according to the drive becomes the positive reinforcer of that behavior. Yes, so these are the 4 fundamentals of learning process. I am recapping it once again. So you must want something, drive, notice something, cue, do something, response, and get something, reinforcement. Fine? Yes. Now we are going to see how these 4 elements are involved in learning process and how do personality actually develop. So yes, so the process, I know the slide looks a bit more confusing, but once I try to explain, things will get more easier. So our personality will develop when we face something called the learning dilemma. Okay? So imagine that you as a human have a set of behavioral hierarchy, and as I rightly put, these behavioral hierarchy is sustaining life on earth. So you do certain behavior so that you can live in earth with peace. Right? So you are faced with a learning dilemma where the current environment is not satisfied with your behavioral hierarchy, which means that your behaviors or your responses that you are making is not providing you a reinforcement for the sustenance of the behavior. Okay? So what then happens is that you might look for something called a change. Okay? A change. So you will go out to create new behavior so that the new drives can be satisfied. So new responses can be added to your hierarchy in order to cater the drive and also in order to get rewarded. So what happens? We start as a baby. We were seeing the baby example having limited responses. So what happens? As the need for creation of new responses increase as you age, you get new responses added in your hierarchy. So you as a fully functioning adult, you have n number of responses arranged in a hierarchy. So when you are faced with learning dilemma only, you experience ways to add new response hierarchy. When you don't have learning dilemma, you don't actually have the need to actually perfect yourself or change yourself. According to behavioristic perspective, we always change our response hierarchy in relation to the environmental functions that your behavior has. So learning occurs or your personality develops when your current response hierarchy fails to provide satisfactory reduction of the drive. That results in the rearrangement of the response hierarchy. You might add some responses, you might delete some responses, or you might even create new responses to your hierarchy. So you might actually, let's say that you are one academically non-academic person, let's just say it like that. So but you want to have academic success because nowadays education has more importance. So what you do? You include responses like reading textbooks twice a day, going through notes, keeping in contact with the teachers for doubt clarification and all. These responses can be newly added to your response hierarchy, and it might change the way you as a person actually are. So it might actually change your personality and you might become more functional in terms of academic success. So yes, we are at the end of the seminar. So as usual, I would like to end it with a quote. I found this quote a bit funny, so I want you to read it with me. So the 2 best sources of information about normal human personality are the rats and neurotic humans who seek professional help. This quote was given by Dollard and Miller. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Pooja signing off. Thank you.